However, you guys had a tougher year with us.
Mhm.
So you were only about if you would have been about 3 points better with pooling, you would have had the same rate adjustment as the trust. But because you were about 3% higher falling outside of your corridor. So when you were asking about the the safe harbor, you're kind of asking about that mod factor.
Yeah.
You guys have a 15% grace based on your, how close are you to the average of the trust. If you would have been within 15%, you would have had the exact rate increases every other county, except for we had 2 counties whose rates went down. We actually had 7 counties whose rates went up. Well, you were about 3% outside of your corridor above that, so your rate increase was slightly higher than the average of the trust. So when you look over this 11-year history that we've provided you in this letter, the far column shows national medical and prescription drug trend over these last 11 years has been 8.9, so almost 9%. The healthcare trust itself has been 5.8% over that same time frame.
Okay.
And when you look 25, you guys had kind of a tougher year with us. In 18 and 19, you had a tougher year with us. And hopefully we're gonna get back to 2015 where you guys had a great year with us and where we didn't take any kind of a rate increase, we actually decreased your rates 4.6%. So over that same 11-year time span, your average rate increase has been about a 6.4, which is still statistically much better than the national average, just maybe not.
Slightly higher than Macon.
Right. Do you want to add anything in terms of how the trust operated?
Yeah, so this is the part where, we're counties, we pool together, and so we're the ones, right? It's county commissioners, just like you and me, on that committee that look at these trends and say, okay, what are we gonna do?
Right.
Because the idea is we really are looking out for our people, right? So, and it's interesting, if you get in there, I've been on it now for 4 years, I think, my 4th year, because I started through the chair, so that you go on it as an executive board person, right? Anyway, no, I've only been 3 years, because you don't the first year in, sorry. Anyway, but there's an interesting push and pull, because on one hand, you want to maintain strong. You don't want to get where all of a sudden you go south on not enough money for enough claims. I've learned a lot about insurance, far more than I ever thought I would, but it's this balance. But it's also like, how can we be as efficient as we can be so that we're not, overcharging, right? We're all commissioners and we're pretty cheap. We don't like spending dollars. And so this year, it was actually recommended by our actuarialist. He looked at it and said, depending on how you measure the trends, he recommended between the 9.6 and the 14 something. 14.4. And we all looked at it, and because we have a really good team that we work with, Mako folks, and the board itself, but they looked at it and said, listen, we are getting overcharged. We're not getting what we thought we should for our medications, because that's a big pusher, right? Those increases on medications are really the things that are pushing overall medical expenses. And so we changed to this new group. So we don't have 2 years worth of data on that. That's been
We had about 7 months.
7 months to look at. But they're coming through what we understood we were gonna get when we switched to the CVS Pharmacies group through NACO. We're seeing that. It's like this major reduction, 3 million?
3 million, which is about 40%.
Right.
Which is huge.
It's huge.
Yeah, it is.
Which is where we were able to look at that 9.6. That was kind of, the actuarialists are, they're not quite chicken little, but they're always like, oh, you don't want to get behind, so they're always trying to make sure that you're in a safe zone. But they said normally we go 24 months back. What did it look like? What's the trend over the last 24 months to average? What does that look like? If you did that, we're at that 14 point something %. But if we only went back the last 12 months, because of this change in our pharmacy, we came up with the 9.6. And because it really does look like we made the right decision there, that's probably a safe bet. And so that's what we went with, the 9.6. And it's because we look at it and we see, all right, here's the 7 counties, you guys being one of them that's gonna see some increase above whatever we do. And Mako has this kind of a balancing process where it says, you know, the pool as a total is looked at. We try to, you know, we set rates for everybody. However, each individual county also is accounted for. So if you are having higher, you know, if your loss ratio is higher than the average within that, you know, 15%, whatever that zone, it kicks you into this where you might have an additional adjustment up or an additional adjustment down, depending on mod factor kind of discussion.
Yeah.
So we look at that because you guys must have been about 4%, whatever it was, because what is it? What was theirs? There's this,
Oh,
yeah, 13.7, and it was 9.8. So you know, 3.5% or whatever, 4%, 3.5% difference in over the total, the pool in general.
Right.
There were counties that were bumping the 10% because, or the 5%, sorry, not the 10%,
Yeah,
the 5% up. Their loss ratios might even been higher than that, but they're gonna have a full 5%. But we look at that because we're trying to soften those kind of pushes on everybody.
Right.
So we eat it a little bit in the pool for the guys that are, you know, because you're getting 9% plus some, and you look at that and say, listen, you can't do 18, 20% jumps. It becomes very difficult. So we try to soften that up a little bit in that. And then on the other end, you actually, if you're really getting good numbers, you can actually see reductions down to 10% below, right? Now, we didn't have anybody that was 10% down, but there was a
We
couple
did.
that were down.
I had one county.
Was it 10%? Okay.
Yeah, so they actually got a rate reduction of 0.2%.
Yeah, there
Just
you go.
like back in 2015,
Right.
you guys had a rate reduction.
Yeah.
4.6%.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you're really seeing you know, there's an opportunity there both. If you get healthier, you see better things, but we try to look after the counties on the other end too. So it's really quite a discussion about where are we gonna go, and there's always, you know, some that are saying, nope, we gotta get the high amount to protect the pool, and on the other hand, people going, yeah, but our counties are, you know, and
Right.
so there's a lot of process that goes into it. I just say that to say this, that's the difference between you owning your pool and going with company X, right? Because company X is just, it's a money thing, and that's what they're looking for, right? And so you don't have that kind of input. And I will tell you, you don't have the kind of service that you get like with a Pam. I mean, I deal with insurance stuff all the time. Do you ever get this kind of a review on what things look like?
No.
That's what Mako does, right? It's about customer service. These people work for you guys, and they come out here to make sure that you understand it and work with you on the issues. And just on our drive over, we start having conversations about just things in our county that we're probably missing, you know, within our payroll and stuff we need to do that normally you'd never really hear about. That it's, you know, we're gonna work together to make sure we get things done right. But I guess I'm just saying that that's part of it. Whenever you look at it, isn't just the numbers. It's like who's looking out for you. And my personal take on it is kind of like the work comp trust with the state versus what work comp trust was like when Mako was running it, right? Because we used to have, he started under Mako work comp trust, and I know of several instances where employees, where we have them on video, getting injured on the job, and the state fund denied it. And those guys end up having to get an attorney to sue to get covered on something that any normal person would look at and say, these guys were on the job, and that was a ice spot that, you know, I mean, it's obvious. There's the difference. Our work comp trust used to take care of our employees, probably too generous, right? Maybe why it's cheaper at the state. But I can tell you that's the direction that you come from when you're a member of the pool, is we're looking out for each other because we know that, you know, your employees are as important as our employees are to us in Fergus County or across the state, and so we treat it like that. So that's my little pitch about
Okay.
kind of how we go through the process and why this really is about looking after county employees.
I wish there wasn't this county feature in your view. Well, I mean, you're forced to. But that's only because we all have our own little yes or no's. But we should be just looked at in the large view. Montana really is a very healthy state. And the 7 counties that we're all into, we should all just be one lump sum. We could care less what goes
Instead of
on.
having a mod factor
Yeah,
between.
we have all these little mod factors per county, which we really, damn.
I
it's
think the
almost-
reason that that's there, right, the theory behind that is it's an incentive for you guys to look at and say, okay, people, what are we doing? What do we need to improve? And some of it is, I can tell you, when you looked on the page, it talks about what's the average age of the employee,
Yeah,
right?
right there, I picked up on that.
And I can tell you it was interesting because, you know, one of our biggest employment groups is the road department. And in the last couple of years, we've had all these guys retire and all these young guys come in, and it's amazing the difference on insurance claims.
Yeah.
So, you know, that's part of it is it's that part of how much do you make the young people pay to cover the old people, and so you get pushed into that. But it's also an incentive at the local level for each county to try to improve the health. And like the diabetes things is, you know, you're right on. That is something that if you put the effort in, you can make a difference in the health outcome with something like diabetes, because it is an ongoing, but there are definitely, you know, lifestyle and diet choices that make a huge difference in that.
Of course.
So also kind of to address your, your comment, because I've thought about that plenty of times over the number of years, and I've even said, so, just so you know, if you're a county under 25, you just always get the average of the Mako Trust, because you're just too small. Like, I went to like the counties under 25, I have one that has, if I looked at what their actual loss ratio was for just that county, it might be over 200% because they had one person that was sick because you only have 10 employees. So we looked, I said, well, maybe we could move this up to like 50 employees or whatever, and why can't it be? And it's because when they started the healthcare trust 20 years ago, and that's really what it was. We started at about 20 years. So we haven't been in business 100 years like a lot of other insurance companies. But if we did that, the counties that have lower rates are typically, they have lower rates because they've been the healthier counties. They would all leave the trust. And then we would be stuck with just the less healthy counties to try and keep building the trust with. And that's the reason they haven't done away with all mod factors. And
Well, that's a good argument.
that's the reason that ultimately we can't do what you suggested doing, because I'll be honest with you, it'd be great if it was like that for me. My job would be way easier, but ultimately that's the reason that
Well, and I know exactly what you're saying as well, because then you're gonna have, here we're kind of bumping up, and so you're gonna have other counties who are gonna say, I wanna know what's really happening in my county. So, yeah, we'll have to live with that.
Based on these numbers, it sounds like we're currently kind of a drain on the pool. That our health expenses have been higher than normal, which is pushing us, I guess you're saying we're 3-4% above the average rate.
well, I mean, over the last 9-11 years, you're only really just a little over
I'm with
It
you.
didn't take much to get it up there.
But I guess that's the point, it can cut both ways. You can say, well, so other counties can say, hey, get rid of Muscle Shell, they're driving the rates up. But then there's less contribution to the
exactly.
pool. So, and I can appreciate what you were saying, Ross, it's both art and science. Whereas a lot of it's just science. Here's the numbers, this is it. You're making judgment calls as to what you're going to set things at, But I was kind of surprised with some of these numbers. It does feel like right now we're not a super healthy county.
Yeah,
And-
I feel sick with doing that.
But I do see that when you look at the average age,
Yeah.
you would expect maybe that. So I don't know what I'm trying to say other than this has been eye-opening in terms of, it's humbling because I do think we need to maybe do more, but I don't know what we can do but to help people get healthier because, The other thing, a dumb question, is do 180 shifting gears here, as long as that's what I do.
That's what he does.
Why do we have both workers' comp and healthcare benefits? We have people that get healthcare benefits and workers' comp.
Well, so, you know, basically really what it boils down to, there's laws about both. So if somebody's hurt on the
On the
job,
jobs,
you
it's a
have
difference.
to cover people for their injuries that they obtained while they were employed by you. So there's work comp rules, but then in Montana, there's also a law that you, as a government organization with 50 or more employees, you have to, there's a code, Montana code, that says you have to offer employee benefits. And so, but work comp isn't necessarily considered an employee benefit because it's a law that you have to
Right.
insure them, because it could be that somebody's lack of maintenance from a machine maybe is what caused that injury or whatever. So it's interesting that then let's throw another piece of that pie in, is property and casualty. You know, you also have a responsibility to carry that type of
Right.
insurance. And really, they're just all totally different things. Just like for us, I get a lot of questions like, well, why aren't my eyes, they're on my body, why do I have to have vision insurance? Well, if your vision exam is for a medical condition, because I'm a diabetic, I have the macular degeneration or whatever, it falls under medical. But if I'm just going to look to see if I need to wear glasses or not, that's vision. So it's like every little, like if somebody bashes my teeth out because I got in a fight or I got in an accident, that's medical.
It's an
But
interesting example.
yeah, but if
It can happen.
but if I just, you know, have a cavity, that's dental. So, yeah, it can happen, absolutely.
It can
Or
happen,
I
oh,
could,
yeah.
or I could fall, you know, and
Oh, yeah.
so, I mean, it's, to me, the insurance, the whole thing about insurance is like, how did I even end up here? Like,
Well,
this is all a bunch of craziness, but
Kind of
there's just
represented is
all
the overlap. Like, we have these workers' comps, and workers' comp's strict as hell for what they're gonna pay and what they're not. And in some instances, it feels like the worker's getting screwed. And then they come and try and get the rest of the coverage on their healthcare benefits, or they can't, like if somebody has to have an ankle operated on, that's workers' comp and that's it.
Right, so when you have somebody that's had an injury from work comp, everything to do with that injury
Yeah.
is covered by them.
Okay,
But let's say that person, you know, they jumped off a grader and broke their ankle. So it happened on the job, and maybe technically it was kind of their fault because they jumped off a machine, but nonetheless, they were on the job, right?
all right.
Everything with that has to be covered by work comp. But then let's say that employee goes to the doctor because they're gonna have surgery on that ankle, and they walk in and they're doing their pre-surgery exam, and they're like, did you know you need to have a stent put in because your heart's in tough shape? Then we kick in,
Gotcha.
medical kicks in.
I
So
don't know,
they're
it's
just,
kind of struck me as, but when I get it now, it's pretty
Yeah.
straightforward.
Yeah, and Commissioner, workers' comp, there's a lot of other benefits from workers' comp that she's not covering.
like their
Okay.
salaries.
Well, so when you're dealing with workers' comp, okay, and if an employer is negligent in some way, what's been given up by having that workers' comp and that guaranteed pool of insurance there is the ability for that employee to turn around and sue the employer for negligence, because the claim just gets made against workers' comp. I was sitting in a meeting, and there was a great deal of discussion about putting in a step at one various part of the county, right? They're gonna put this step in, they're having this very nice step made. Okay, and well, what's their liability if one of the employees is going in and out? Right now, without that step and gets injured, well, there is no liability because it's covered by workers' comp, because even if we as the employer were totally and completely negligent in having like a cinder block there instead of an actual step, it's covered by workers' comp. Okay, and so then if at that point in time they break their leg because they're stepping out onto a cinder block instead of onto a nice metal step that's appropriately painted, a day glow orange color, then that covers the county both for negligence, right, in having an improper step there, but it also covers the cost of any medical that employee suffers, and the employee can't turn around and sue us for negligence. Okay? Or potentially punitive damages because that employee's been complaining every day for the last 6 months, look, this stuff is dangerous, somebody's gonna break a leg on this. Right? They're still maxed out with that workers' comp.
They are, but I mean, not to beat this to death, but if you were just to do the numbers and say, well, why spend the money on a step if I'm not gonna have to pay any more than what I kick into the workers' comp? And the answer is, well, the more cases you have, the more lawsuits, the more your rates go up.
Exactly.
So, but it is different, but now that you mentioned it, it sounded like a really dumb question, because it is just if it's on the job, then that's it.
No, Bob, I've had the exact same thought, like, you're doubling up on
Yeah.
doing some medical work, like,
Yeah.
it seems like if you got covered in one place, why are you having to cover in another? But, you know, insurance is just so many different lanes of risk that you're looking at, and so that's all figured in when you look at whatever you're trying to insure. The underwriter looks at it and says, okay, what are the other areas that are covered, where are we liable, you know, what does that look like, and yeah, so it all ends up getting built in, just like you said. I mean, there's other things to be engaged in, but trust me, the underwriters are looking at all of that to determine what's the
Right.
risk factor in each one of these lanes.
Right.
Yeah, that's interesting.
It is pretty interesting.
Okay, so what's next? Is the next the big sticker shock?
Well, no, I mean, I already told you that, you know, to me, your sticker shock was the 13.7%, but then also, you know, let's just, I had one other thing I needed to tell you.
Thank you.
Yes, which is, the dental also had a slight rate increase. Vision and life did not change. And dental, we decided that it needed to have, our actuary decided it needed to have a 4.7% rate increase. And we always round to the nearest dollar. Well, the good news is we also figured out that we can give the employees $400 more of benefit just by adding those 2 additional dollars onto our dental plan. So last year, the dental was $41 for an individual employee. This year, it will be $43. But if I need to have a lot of dental work done, last year we would have only paid out $1,600, and this year we'll pay out $2,000. So I wanted to say that before we moved on. What I've handed out, where you can see the rate sheet that has your seal on it,
Yep,
that's your current rate sheet. That's what's happening right now today.
yeah, I was gonna say, these are
Yes,
what we're doing
yes,
now. I
your
thought, man, we
contribution
did
is $994. You can see that you offer these 5 plans. Because you're a county that has 50 or more employees, you can offer up to 5 different health plans. And I'm just gonna review, so you know, you can see that your current plans that you're offering this year are the RM 2000, RM 3000, the basic plan, and then 2 high deductible health plans. Well, when you go over to the new rate sheet, which is the one that has it's got green in the middle of it, and nothing printed on the back, so it looks like this.
Okay.
I don't know if I got that.
Can somebody short you one? Here we go, or have one right here.
Okay, you got one, Mike?
I don't know what, yeah, I think I do.
Well, he has 2 of them.
Yeah, I got
Well, no wonder I don't have one.
There you go.
Didn't think you were responsible.
Oh, okay, here we go.
Yeah, I was gonna say, if you're gonna try and steal something a lot more exciting than this, right? So, just so you know, like, what's the breakdown of your plan? You currently have 7 employees that choose the RM 2000. And your contribution didn't cover the difference. You know, employees who choose that plan, they're paying the difference of your contribution versus the cost of that. You don't have any that have picked the RM 3000. You have 40, or the bulk of your employees take the basic plan, which is the BP 2000.
Right.
You have 1 on the HD 3500, and you have 4 on the HD 4000. Of your employees, you have 48 that are insuring only themselves. You have 1 that's insuring a spouse, 2 that are insuring just children, and you have 1 employee that's insuring their entire family.
Okay.
So you could see if you keep doing what you've kind of been doing. In the past, you guys have always just said, we're gonna cover the basic plan, it was $9.94. You can see that this year, the rate for that would be $11.30. We're not saying you have to do that, we're not saying, you know, I just wanna make sure that you guys are understanding where you've been and.
Yeah, but, I mean, I kinda zeroed right in on that.
Yep, I
That's the
figured.
bump between 994 and 1130,
Right,
if we were to do this year what we did last year for our
Right.
employees.
on the
What,
rate
what,
sheet,
as a percent, what is that? Is that?
so it's 13.7, which
Okay,
is
that's-
the
that's
top of
right.
that page.
Got it.
The page of, with the green in the middle, it's
Okay.
the 3rd line down. That's a 13.7% rate
Yeah.
increase,
And a dental rate change of 4.7.
right?
Pam, just to ask you a quick
Yeah.
question here. So the HD 4000, I see it says 100%. Is that 100% the plan pays after the $4,000 deductible?
Mhm.
And then up here the BP 2000, and that's 70% that the plan pays after the 4,000. So the county could.
No. So the BP has got a $2,000 deductible.
Okay.
Which technically, we pay the first $300 of any medical bills, then you have a $2,000 deductible, so like if I broke my leg, the plan's gonna pay the first $300 and it's an accident, they're gonna pay another $300. Well, then I'm gonna have to pay $2,000. Once I've paid $2,000, then the insurance plan will pay 70% of the bills, and the 30% that the employee pays, if it adds up to another $2,000 to that $4,000 max out of pocket. So on like example of a broken leg, if it's $40,000, just know that, you know, you're gonna pay about $4,000, we're
Right.
gonna pay about $136,000.
Okay, because it maxes out then after the employees paid the $2,000 deductible and an additional $2,000 in other premiums that they will never pay more than $4,000
Right,
total out of pocket.
right. They
And
should,
that's a huge benefit. In other words, their max out of pocket's $4,000.
Yeah.
And, that's huge.
Or I guess.
And it-
And all the plans are pretty good. It's interesting though, so they'll pay, so let's look at the HD 3500. So there's a 3500 deductible, but after that it pays 100% of the bills. But what kicks into the, oh, that's because it has a 35 out of pocket.
And then it's paid at 35,000, yeah, the 3,500, once they pay that, it pays at 100? On the
Yeah.
HD?
so Gary Lynn, let's say that you told me you're gonna have baby this year.
Too old for that.
Oh, is there-
I just am
did we get
teasing
that?
her. So let's say that was the case, you know, or maybe you just hired some new young gal to work, you know, some here, and she says she's gonna have a baby. I almost always tell her, you should really look at that plan, because that's got the smallest max out of pocket.
The
So-
HD
The
3,500.
HD
Yes.
3500, and if you're gonna have a baby, odds are you're
You're
gonna
gonna use
meet
it.
your max out of pocket, right? And if you look last year where the contribution was $994, well, they had to pay, well, you know, the difference is what, $12? So they paid $12, which for a year is what, $144 or whatever, more.
And they
That's
save
what, but they
$500.
saved $500 in max out of pocket.
Yeah.
So does that kind of make sense?
It makes perfect sense. The only twist is though, when you help me with mine, there may be different rules with different prescription drugs.
So, you're right. So prescription medications for both the basic and the high deductible health plan, we only pay preventive drugs. So like, for example, let's say that I take a high cholesterol, like a statin, because I have high cholesterol. Or I take, like lisinopril because I have high blood pressure. Or I take metformin, which is an inexpensive drug for people that are diabetic. Those generic drugs that are classified as preventive medications are free, no matter which plan you take.